So let's begin by talking about technique. And what I want to specifically talk about is basically how the piano works, but then also a push versus grab technique. Now, on a piano, you normally have a hammer, all right? It's the piece of wood that has felt over it, and it hits the string and it makes a sound, okay? You probably already know that. But what you might not know is that playing the piano is not about how hard you push. A lot of times people think you got to like push hard in order to make a forceful sound. Now, on a digital piano, let me just pause for a second. On a digital piano, it is more about pressure, okay? Because it's more of a pressure sensitive rather than hammer sensitive, because there's no hammers inside of a digital piano, usually. Some of them do, but most of them do not. So there it's more like, you know, how hard you hit, and that's why it's important for you to practice on a grand piano or an upright piano, on a real piano, whenever you have a chance, because it is a very different technique. But basically what it is, it's the speed in which you grab at those notes, which changes the speed of the hammer, which in turn changes the volume that you make, all right? So it's best to not think, oh, I gotta like really, you know, bang and push. It's more about how grabbing with that finger. Now, of course, there's a certain pressure there. Okay, let's not deny that. There's a pressure there with that grab, but it's really, you see that speed in which I'm grabbing? So imagine these are the notes, all right, and I'm just grabbing in, okay, to hit those notes, rather than doing this. Okay? So we're going to be going through these 5-finger exercises to start, and one thing you should be trying to do is grab at those notes. See how I'm like grabbing? And one thing you could practice is just put your hands down and just grab at the keyboard. Okay? Now another thing you could do is try just grabbing at notes, you know, like you're actually, like there's a ball or something underneath there, and you're just trying to grab and pick up that ball. Try thinking of going through the key bed. That might seem like a weird concept, but here is your key bed, basically. So from the top here to the bottom, that's how far down the key goes, like about that far, right? Okay? So try grabbing through that, so you're almost trying to grab something that's underneath there, all right? Just try and, you know, just focus on do it with 2 hands. Make sure nobody's listening. They're going to think like, they're going to wonder, what are you doing? All right? So all you're trying to do is get this grab technique. You can also just do it on your legs, you know, just grab, grab, grab. Now, this will help to build up these, you know, smaller muscles within your hand as well, which is obviously going to help your speed and your fluidity, all right? There are things out there that, you know, you can like do single finger exercises, you know, stress balls and all that. Don't do any of that. You don't need any of that stuff to get faster, stronger fingers, okay? You got it all right here. Just practice on your instrument. In fact, some of those things sometimes, they were actually kind of big in the 90s, and I notice now that I don't see them as much. Probably because a lot of people ended up getting tendonitis and carpal tunnel from them, because you're focusing on one thing. Real quick story, broad brushstrokes. You can look up the details of the story. But Robert Schumann, who was a fantastic pianist and composer centuries ago, created a device to work, you know, on his single fingers, and he ended up losing. I'm not sure of complete use of his hands, but at least some use of his hands, and ended up actually going a little nuts and dying. So you really want to avoid any of that kind of stuff to like, oh, you know, get stronger fingers by getting this device. Don't do it, all right? You don't need it. I've never done it. I don't need it. I've been able to get strong enough fingers just by actually, you know, guess what? Practicing. So your best thing is just to practice. So work on that grab. Mostly it's a conceptual thing. We're also going to be talking about staying loose. Of course, remember, it's all about posture as well. You know, pay attention to what your body is doing. If you're hunching over or like, you know, doing this, arching your back, you know, your shoulders way up, all of that is going to affect what comes out at the instrument. So make sure you're nice, loose, relaxed. You know, a good thing to take a look at is that Alexander technique. If you've never reviewed that, Alexander technique is a, you know, kind of a body awareness technique, which, you know, you can do some research on that. It's actually some good stuff. And then stay loose. You know, so when you're practicing, just try and keep this whole mechanism, your shoulders and everything in your arms, as loose as possible. Also playing light. See how I'm just like letting my fingers do the work right now. I'm holding some of my weight in my shoulders. So I'm just like letting my fingers just arch and just, you know, I'm just moving my fingers right underneath. Okay? All right, so that's the push versus grab. Try not to push. Even when you're doing chords like this, where you're coming down on a chord, you notice that if I do it in slow motion here, I'm still grabbing at those notes versus this. I'm not pushing. In fact, that push in the arm, let me pull up my sleeve here so you can see. That push in the arm is really like, take a look at that stress that's being created right in here. Versus when, look at what happens when I grab and I let go. See that? See how it's released now. Right? So you don't want to push and hold that down. I'm just holding all of this tension in my arm, and eventually I'm going to hurt myself by doing that. Okay? So, see you in the next chapter.